Hello, welcome to A Conversation With here at CAU-TV, here on the beautiful Clark Atlanta University campus. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tammy Gordon-Parnell. We have the distinct honor today to welcome Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Outreach, Karen Richardson, and she's here in Atlanta to talk a little bit about her work and what she does representing the United States Department of State. So welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you do and what your mission is here in the United States?
Excellent. So, as you mentioned, I am Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. And the U.S. Department of State is the federal executive agency that's responsible for implementing the foreign policy of the United States. It is headquartered in Washington, D.C., and it has hundreds of diplomatic missions abroad. And it is run by the Secretary of State, who in this case currently is John Kerry. And he serves as a foreign policy advisor to the president. In this case, it's President Barack Obama. And so I actually oversee a bureau in the department that is focused on outreach to the American public. It is the Office of Public Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs. And that means that we are reaching out to a variety of domestic audiences. It's think tanks, it's NGOs, it's university students, it's different diaspora and constituency groups. It's also on the other side, state and local elected officials such as mayors and governors and state legislators. And so basically everybody outside of members of Congress, there's a separate bureau that handles that part of the outreach.
To advise about what we're doing abroad, no?
Absolutely. The mission of the Public Affairs Bureau is to communicate with both domestic and international audiences on what the foreign policy priorities and what the policy is of the United States on various international issues.
Okay, Deputy Assistant Secretary, why don't we go there? Why don't we talk a little bit about what the foreign affairs policies are of the United States?
Okay, great.
And the priorities,
Yes, the
I should say.
Yeah, there are quite a few of them, as you can imagine, with all the things that are happening around the world. And the first thing that comes to mind, actually, is President Obama is in Cuba today.
That's right.
If you all recall, back in December of 2015, I think it was December 17th, he announced a new course to chart with Cuba.
That's right.
U.S.-Cuba relations. And so, there's still work to be done there, but it was really a sort of a historic first step. And so I would say that would be one of the priorities. The Secretary, as in Secretary John Kerry, as well as the President, has talked a lot about the need for a durable climate agreement. And so, of course, we had the conference in Paris last fall, where it sort of came into a very well negotiated agreement on climate. And so, of course, there is work to be done to implement that. So I would say climate change is a priority. Of course, with all that's happening in the world, combating violent extremism is also another priority. And working with our partners internationally and domestically, and coming up with a strategy of prevention and addressing sort of the drivers of that. Let's see. So there are just a number of them. There's of course, the refugee and migration issue.
Sure.
And then, of course, there's trade. So there are no shortage of priorities that we're focused on. Yes.
So as you travel around the U.S. and abroad, what do you find that most people are most interested in? What is it that people are really focused on?
Well, I would say domestically, people are focused on.
Or even concerned about.
They're concerned about, really, I think that, with some of the people that we're talking to, it just depends on your audience.
Sure.
So with university students, for example, they want to know, basically career trajectory issues.
Okay.
They want to know, well, how can we sort of go out and do what you guys do? How can we become a part of the State Department?
Right.
How do what areas can we serve, and what the skill sets do you need to be able to do that?
And that's part of what you do out here too, right?
It is, and that is one of the sort of key things that we talked about at the event today. And the event that I'm referring to again is the event that we did with the Peace Corps. It was hosted, at Morehouse with the Peace Corps on the need for diversity in international service. And so, of course, that lent itself to a lot of questions like, okay, well, if we decide to serve, what kinds of skills do you need to be able to do that? And we talked about, you should, if you can, study abroad, really look at internships that are available throughout the the different agencies, whether it is a Peace Corps, whether it's the State Department, and there's so many different agencies.
And people aren't aware of that. They think
not.
it's just the State Department,
I think
but
it's just the State Department, but I think that there are other agencies in the executive branch that have an international arm, and so the most obvious, of course, is the State Department. And at the State Department, you've got the Wrangell Fellowship, you've got the Pickering Fellowship, and then the Peace Corps. They have theirs as well. So
and these are opportunities to enter the Foreign Service.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I get lots of questions about it. And so, at every opportunity, we make sure to go out and talk to people so they at least, have the information available so they can make the choice when the time comes, what opportunity fits best for them.
Right.
So a lot of different issues, but usually with our university students, they're very interested in how they can gain the skills, what skills you need, and how do we get there.
Okay, since we're talking about university students, what's the profile of the perfect Foreign Service officer or someone serving in abroad for representing the United States?
See, and I think this is like the very kind of a key piece of this, and this is the beauty of it, is that you just have to have a desire to serve. Mm-hmm. Everything else will come, because if you're a Foreign Service officer or you're trying to be a Foreign Service officer, you can take a language. So if you don't, and I always say study a language, study abroad if you can, but also there are some people that are not able to do those things for a number of reasons. So if you have a desire to serve and you can read and there's an application, then you apply, and then all those skills will come and you can sort of build them. And that's like that is sort of, I think, the way that we envision it, is that there isn't really one profile. There are people who join the Foreign Service and service from all walks of life. There are people who had a lot of opportunities, to people that didn't have as many opportunities, but they find their way to serve and gain the skills that they need.
That's excellent, excellent. And can we talk a little bit about diversity and improving diversity numbers in okay?
Yeah, so the Peace Corps has taken up a number of reforms in their application system, and so they are at an all-record sort of high in the number of applications that are coming from minority populations. Mm-hmm. The State Department as well has been focused on this. Diversifying the workforce has been a primary objective of our recruitment and outreach marketing. Mm-hmm. Focusing on three main things: it's outreach and recruitment, it's reviewing the hiring processes, as well as focusing deliberately on retention. And so it's basically coming out and making sure that we're talking to different different populations who are pretty much underrepresented in this field. Mm-hmm. And then we just pretty much focused on making sure that we're having the conversations with, and I think what we've seen is an upward trend in the applications for the Foreign Service in African American and Hispanic demographics. So there's definitely still a ways to go, mm-hmm. But I think that we're absolutely something that we're focused on and prioritized at all levels of the agency.
And that's part of the reason you're here today.
Yes, I'm sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so even if it, so I think I try to make sure that we talk about these things, even if we're not coming to talk about it, specifically about an event in diversity.
So why don't we talk a little bit about this period where we are in the United States right now, the election year, and it's a very interesting one. But tell us a little bit about how an election year affects the type of work that you do.
It's an interesting time, the election year. I think it poses because there are a lot of people that are paying attention. This is when they're paying attention to the issues. Mm-hmm. But with that said, we came in here, to implement the priorities of the President of the United States and the Secretary of State. So it just means that we are just focused on, what we sort of came here to do, and we can't really control or sort of what's happening around us. We just sort of stay the course and focus on the priorities that we sort of came to focus on, mm-hmm. and just forge ahead and kind of finish what we sort of came here to do.
And so as that becomes, as foreign policy becomes subject for the debates between the candidates and whatnot, do you find that people are more engaged in what's going on abroad, or not particularly?
Because I think some of the questions that what we might get when we're going to talk about, whether it's a migration and refugee issue or whether it's countering violent extremism, I think, especially when you're going out and talking to domestic audiences who are focused on the election and can now, if they weren't paying attention before, they can now sort of put it into context and say, oh, okay, so what does this mean for the next president, that type of thing. So in some ways they are, but in some ways some of the audiences that have been engaging with us sort of have already been focused on these issues.
Right.
But it's only that, I think, segment of the population that is much more focused on it now that they are hearing it being debated in some of the sessions that they're having.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and we'll have a further conversation with Deputy Assistant Secretary Karen Richardson. We'll be right back.
Don't worry, 74 people were picked before me in the NFL draft.
To fight childhood obesity, United Way and the NFL are helping kids play at least 60 minutes a day.
Okay, time for the team obstacle course. Yay!
What this place needs is more healthy kids. To get involved or donate, go to unitedway.org/play60.
Now I get it.
Fancy pants peanut butter? A big screen television? You haven't even bought a sofa yet. A motorcycle? When your father finds out, he's gonna flip his shoes with 2 buckles? What do you even need 2 buckles for? Mr. Big Shot, buying whiskey shots for everybody in the bar. From the looks of it, I'd say nobody even remembers. Feed the pig.
Morning, Gary. We are GetSchooled.com. You want a college education, don't you?
You know you do.
That's why we're here. We're free and here to guide you through every step of the way, starting with attendance. Gary, financial aid forms. Picking a college, man. You and us. We go together like tacos and Tuesday.
And I love tacos. Go to GetSchooled.com.
You've messed up your son's haircut.
Mom?
Do you A, try to fix it,
Like it never happened.
B, work with what you got, or C, show solidarity?
Thank you, baby.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
And we're back. We're here with Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Outreach, Karen Richardson. We've got a bit of time to talk a little bit about your background and how you ended up in this career.
Okay, seems a while ago now, but I am originally from Los Angeles, California, but I went to Howard University undergraduate school. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, I had a teacher by the name of Dr. Linda Haywood. And she taught a Black history course, Black diaspora course. And someone said to me, oh, this is a really tough teacher. No one gets an A in her class. And that was sort of my it sort of inspired me to take her class and see if I could. And so, in her class, and, I basically started getting into, African politics. Mm-hmm. It was her passion. And then it basically seeped into me, and so I just really became very passionate about African politics and anything I could read, any class I could take. So that's basically how it sort of ignited an interest in anything, international related. So it basically sort of kind of
evolved sort of
into study abroad. I even went to to get my master's in international relations at the London School of Economics, where I did my dissertation on Angola, which was her focus too. So years and years and years had gone by, and so I just did a lot of study abroads. And when I started to, I interned in then Senator Obama's office in Washington D.C. when he was a U.S. Senator. Uh-huh. And the rest is pretty much history. So, so I've been working, for him in some capacity since then. But my interest in international affairs, even though I had, I was on the campaign as well, but managed to stick with the issues and foreign policy around there and sort of some of the more domestic issues more broadly. But my interest in international affairs has never, wavered. And then I ended up at the State Department maybe about a year and a half ago as a political appointee. after spending a couple of years at the White House.
But you know what's interesting? You know, that really is a lesson that it can be one professor or one teacher or one moment that can affect a lifetime, no?
Absolutely. I think that, you know, this is why I always make it the point to sort of go out and not saying that, you know, I'm going to inspire one or two people, but the possibility that you can speak about your experiences and shed light onto some of the things that you have been able to witness and the rewards that can sort of come with it. You never know who you're affecting.
That's
right.
right.
You know, sort of there are people that just don't necessarily know what's available to them, and you know, I just like to sort of get out there and also talk to people so they know, and they have access to information and they can make the decision and sort of what's best for them. But absolutely, I always, you know, give credit to a lot of my teachers who've taken interest in my development all the way through. I still consult Dr. Haywood on, you know, different sort of courses in my life that have sort of, you know, and she's still right there, and you know, give a lot of credit to her. She talked very passionately about, you know, sort of what her interest was, and it literally just was like, oh, it's my interest now, and it's taken me to where I am now.
Right. Engaging, and that's a perfect segue into Engage America. What's that all about?
So, as I mentioned, you know, our bureau, and particularly the Office of Public Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs, is focused on engaging domestic audiences on U.S. foreign policy priorities, and we just want to make sure, and Engage America sort of comes out of a report, kind of an annual recommendation that talks about, you know, the importance of engaging Americans as partners in foreign policy. And so it's really kind of an extension of the work that's already being done, because you have a lot of different State Department principals who for many years have gone out and really talk about, you know, the department and the priorities, and also talk about recruitment and the ways that you can, you know, become a part of the Foreign Service or the State Department, because it's not just Foreign Service, it's also civil service. You know, and we've also, of course, have diplomats in residence at, you know, different campuses across the country.
And what is that? What's a diplomat in residence?
The diplomat in residence is a program where you have campus-based specialists and foreign service officers around the country who are available on different campuses to talk about careers in the State Department, different internships, and different fellowships. And so I am not 100% sure. I think we've got maybe one here at Clark. You know, I think there are 3.
Right, and of course we've got one on the Spelman campus, Isaiah Parnell, as a matter of fact. That's right.
It is, and so, and they're, you know, a huge part as to why we're able to sort of get our message out, and that students are able to have somebody on their campus at home who is basically available to them to be able to talk about these things.
That's right. Yes. And here on the Atlanta University campus we have Isaiah Parnell.
Yes.
And so he is available for anybody who might be interested in careers in the Foreign Service and how to go about getting involved.
And I would really encourage it, because I think that not all the students, you know, necessarily know you know, who's on their campus, but just be proactive and sort of teaching, be like, I wonder, you know, because there's a wealth of knowledge that is out there and people who are willing to help guide you.
That's right.
And so, you know, I would always encourage students to reach out to their diplomat in residence.
That's right. And, you know, even aside from encouraging people in careers in foreign service, your job is also sort of to educate the public in general about what's going on outside the borders of the United States, no?
Yeah, I mean, so Secretary Kerry gave a speech back in 2013 to students at the University of Virginia, and he always says this, you know, foreign policy is no longer foreign. And, you know, the decisions that we make abroad not only create a ripple outward, but creates a current right back here at home. And world events today demonstrate that diplomacy really is local. So, you know, everything that we're sort of trying to accomplish in the diplomatic realm basically affects people here in Atlanta and across the United States. And so really trying to make the connection and the tangible impacts that diplomacy has, and of course in today's, you know, globally interconnected and interdependent world, it's, you know, we've not seen it to be more truer than it is now.
Right.
And so, and there, you know, there are, you know, local economies and, you know, politics, et cetera, that basically have such an impact abroad, way beyond city, state, and local and county limits. So, So this is one of the things that we're trying to do, is to show here's how it affects in your state. And there's actually a map on state.gov, and it's a map of the 50 states, and if you click on a state, it says these are how many jobs that are going to be created, and how many jobs are being created in your state. This is how the State Department's diplomacy, which is, by the way, 1% of the federal budget. Most people are kind of surprised.
Yeah.
They think, oh, if you ask, people like, well, what percent of the federal budget, is part of the State Department? And like, oh, they probably say 50%, but it's 1%. But it's a significant return on the investment for that 1% in the areas of jobs, entrepreneurship, tourism, etc. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is to make that tangible impact, because it's not always that clear, but like what information we can make available to you so you learn a little bit more.
That's
and
right.
that you have access to information.
That's right. Do you see any sort of trends in terms of geographical focus of the State Department, sort of generally, but also specifically with this administration? I know that the continent of Africa is really wide open now, and you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I think not necessarily trends. I think that through the different bureaus at the department, and what we mean by bureaus is just different divisions within the state. Exactly. So, what we try to do is to really reach out to as diverse a population as possible. There's so many different groups in the United States. There are, diaspora groups. There's there's the ethnic diversity. There's the age diversity. So we really just want to make sure that we are, being diverse in what we are and where we're going and who we're talking to. So if it's the West Coast, it's the West Coast, but there's also Middle America and there's also the South. So we really do make a concerted effort to make sure that we are everywhere.
Yeah. Sure. And for you, that also means abroad.
Sometimes.
Right.
Yes.
And what type of work would you do abroad?
So most recently, there was the conference in Paris for the climate agreement. And of course, and this is sort of goes back to diplomacy is local and the impact that mayors and governors, for example, in the realm of climate change, are having abroad. So the mayors and the governors were very instrumental when they went to Paris, to basically talking about sort of the commitments that they will make, in addition with their subnational counterparts. And so the part of the the intergovernmental affairs segment of my shop is basically, that's the other leg. When I mentioned that we reach out to mayors and governors, was over there in Paris with the mayors and the governors, talking about the impacts of climate change and what commitments they are going to make, in addition to with their subnational counterparts. So that's just one example of one way that my job specifically requires me to travel internationally.
Right.
Yeah.
How big is your office?
So there are probably about 20 public affairs specialists. Yeah.
Okay. And so would your office work directly with the public affairs folks in embassies abroad?
Sometimes, not necessarily. I think that sort of kind of only through our colleagues who work directly with them. But to the extent, if we're going on an international trip, then there's a little bit more interaction. But because we're so domestically focused, it doesn't necessarily require that all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to talk a little bit about the reception of the audience to what you have to say, to your message, and particularly given that the event that you just hosted here in Atlanta with the Peace Corps.
The reception has been very positive. We're talking to, as I mentioned, it kind of depends on the audience. And so if you're talking to university students, they may have a little bit of information on the State Department and the avenues available to them. So it's more kind of inquisitive. Whereas if you're going to go and talk to maybe sort of thought leaders who've been writing on these issues, they've been working on these issues a long time, so you're just providing kind of maybe substantive information on the evolving policy, and you also listen, because that's another thing is that is that I want to stress is that it's not just us going out and just talking to people, it's also listening,
right?
And which is diplomacy.
Right.
So
that's right.
There's what the Secretary of State is doing abroad is diplomacy, but this is also kind of like domestic diplomacy in a way.
That's right.
Where you're talking to people and you're also listening and having a two-way conversation. education.
Right.
'Cause if you can't do it in your own state, then how are you going to do it abroad? So.
Well, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us today. It's been our pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And have a great trip back to Washington.
Thank you.
Okay, this has been Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Outreach, Karen Richardson. And thank all of you for joining us today on A Conversation With. See you next time.